Good morning, everyone. Welcome into HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It's Hump Day. It's Wednesday, and I'm Kevin McPherson. This is HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We've got some intel. I feel like we're doing a lot more of these intel segments lately because we're always getting good information. Today we're going to bring some directly from Arkansas Razorbacks men's basketball coaching staff. A lot of what I've been sharing with you in the last several weeks as we've been in portal season and moved into live eval for high school and grassroots recruiting, all these different things. A lot of that intel is coming really from the thoughts of the staff and where they are with things. Some of this stuff really picked up some momentum yesterday when you saw Boogie flying to Florida. But later in the day, a snippet from Matt Norlander with CBS Sports, one of the college basketball gurus that's out there, does good reporting, has good source information. I don't take his information lightly, but I retweeted a segment from a podcast he did with Gary Parrish within the last 24, 36 hours, whatever, yesterday afternoon. I retweeted this segment, kind of came at the end of their hour-long podcast, and he said, was going through stay or go, stay or pro decisions of several players, and when it got to Carter Knox and Adu Thiero, he said that he thought both of those guys were likely coming back to school. And he added to that, although Carter Knox had gotten more positive feedback from the combine experience than he had anticipated. Very interesting. But he thought that Adu Theorough was coming back. Now, look, we've talked about the Adu Theorough situation. By the way, we're going to bring intel in this segment as well about a big man that Arkansas is recruiting. When we go back to the live eval sessions, I told you guys I wasn't giving everything away all at once. And we had a big Sunday episode after I was in Memphis at Nike EYBL and talked about several players that are kind of front and center. A lot of folks know Arkansas has been recruiting these guys, but there were several other players Arkansas is prioritizing that I didn't bring up on Sunday. I saved some of that for the following day, on Monday. Yesterday's segment was devoted mostly to the Boogie Flan news going to Florida. But I have more intel and information about someone that Arkansas is prioritizing on the front line out of the high school ranks in the class of 2026. And so we're going to talk about him today, and I'm going to share as much as I can, but it's somebody that Arkansas really, really likes, that coaching staff, and have made a priority for a while. This is not something new really on the radar when you look at it, when we kind of remind you of some things. But here recently, now that the first live period just happened, you start to understand who is Arkansas really still recruiting. Maybe some guys they're not as pursuing as much, and we've covered a lot of that. If you haven't seen those Sunday and Monday episodes, by the way, go back and check those out. Our HogvilleNET YouTube Live segments going through multiple names, probably around 10 or more names of guys that Arkansas is really kind of zeroing in on in that class of 2026, and this will be another one we talk about today. Then we're also going to talk about some update on Darius Acuff Jr. and Malik Thomas, stuff that I think you'll like. I also tweeted about this yesterday. I just want to talk a little bit more about it. I saw it as a positive and tweeted as much yesterday afternoon. And then a bracketology update that looks like Arkansas is trending up in terms of way too early Joe Lenardi projections, the way he sees things. So anyway, let's get back to Adu Theorough. I know I started to go there, and then I started setting up what else we're going to talk about. Sorry about that. But Theorough, so Matt Norlander, CBS Sports, talking about Adu Theorough and Carter Knox. He thinks they're both coming back to Arkansas. Mentions Knox got feedback from teams that was good, better than maybe expected. And so, that kind of, on the Knox part of it, it kind of is in line with what I told you that an NBA scout told me who was at the combine. He said with Knox, he knew of at least one team for sure, and maybe another one that want to pursue him further in terms of bringing him in for individual workouts. I did not name those teams, but that was on Monday's segment as well when I talked about that feedback. So teams are definitely looking at him a little harder here. And so we're going to talk more about, I'm going to give a percentage. I'm going to do percentages today on both Knox and Theorough, but let's get into the Theorough part. This is where the staff intel comes in. And so the Matt Norlander stuff, I retweeted it. I tweeted out a link to that podcast. I put the time marker on it, on what you need to look for, fast forward to this point when he talks about Knox and Theorough, because it was really quick. It was like 10 seconds worth of I think they're coming back. Good feedback from Knox. That was it. And he moved on talking about other players in that draft process that have those stay or pro decisions. And with Theorough, that was I guess the thing that we haven't been really focused on, right? Not much of a chance to come back. Technically, he could come back. We've said that. We verified that. Go back to Nick Smith Jr. He was signed with the Clutch agency. They were working on his NIL deals when he was in Arkansas. You can sign with an agent and still maintain your draft eligibility. And, it's just a matter of, do you want to come back? Do you want to leave the door open and talk about that as a possibility? Some players do that when they make their initial announcement. Some don't. Well, Theorough is a guy that could come back. He didn't put his name in the portal either before the deadline. So if he comes back, it's Arkansas. Arkansas was trying to retain him and putting together a big raise for him in NIL to stay. And he's still testing these waters. Well, so you hear this from Matt Norlander. You know that Thiero, when he went to the combine last week, did not do anything outside of the measurables. He did his measurables. He didn't do any of the agility testing. He didn't do any of the 5-on-5 competition. He didn't do the shooting drills. And a lot of that stuff, the competitive part and the agility testing would have been stuff I believe he would have done. Maybe even the shooting drills. If it's worked for the combination of his situation with his knee and the recent injury and being represented by Clutch. A lot of times Clutch's group of players for that class, they kind of pick and choose. They don't do a whole lot at the combine, and that was the case again. By the way, Clutch having its pro day, which we always talk about, and I just saw a video clip on that from Jonathan Giavone a few minutes before coming on. You see Thiero out there with his shirt off, I guess putting in the work. So a lot of NBA teams, scouts, all that stuff, draft gurus are all in attendance for this Clutch pro day. Walter Clayton Jr. out of Florida, several players. The big man that's projected to go highly out of Duke that was a freshman. I'll butcher his last name, but you know who I'm talking about. Some of these other players are in that group of in this class for Clutch, including Duke Theorough. So there's nothing prohibiting Theorough from coming back other than his decision. He was recently on the record stating, he's kind of ready to stay in. The door's kind of closed. Paraphrasing, doors kind of closed in his mind in terms of coming back, but the folks that represent him still want to iron some things out. What they're talking about, what he means by that is a draft guarantee that's acceptable. You see mock draft projections, which are not based on knowledge of these gurus knowing a specific team that has a draft guarantee for a player, or potentially they have heard wind of it, and so they're baking that into the mock draft projection. But you're seeing a lot of these early second round, some late first, but mostly early mid second round for Thiero, the low 30s, which if you go back to, again, a guy like Jalen Williams, where he went 3 drafts ago, he had a draft guarantee to Oklahoma City. He stayed in, gave himself a chance, met with other teams, gave himself a chance maybe to improve on it, and ended up being drafted by Oklahoma City where they promised they would in the early 30s, I think 34th. And he got $4 million guaranteed, 2 first year, 2 second year. And so if Thero's wanting a first round draft guarantee, which a lot of players, that's what they prefer, you'd still have, in my opinion, he'd do better. He'd do better by staying in for an early second round if he could get that kind of money. Most of those guarantees are going to be in line with what J. Will got. Close, somewhere in that ballpark. I think that's better than coming back for a year and getting $2 million or whatever Arkansas would do for him. That's my opinion. However, it's not up to me, right? We know that. So talking to Arkansas's coaching staff. So last night I put those tweets out. I had a radio segment on Drive Time Sports. We talked about the Matt Norlander talk, coming up with this idea that he thinks Thero's coming back. I mentioned that on Drive Time Sports. Had an early dinner right after that segment. I was meeting my lady friend and a couple of her friends. Had an early dinner, and as soon as that was over, when I got out of there, I was back in the car and on the phone with one of Arkansas staffers. So, on the phone with one of Arkansas's coaches to talk about this very thing and other things. And so this is your intel. The staff feels like it is highly unlikely that Adu Thiero comes back to school. without giving more details, I didn't ask for more details on in terms of, well, does that mean that he's got a guarantee? It probably means they know he's got at least one team out there promising him something, and he's still going through the process, kind of like a Jalen Williams. Can he improve on it? Going through pro days. You're saying, why, with the knee, if someone's guaranteed him, why would he still be working out? Why would he be doing what he's doing at pro day? Well, for the very thing I just said. And so the staff feels like it's highly unlikely. They think he's really focused on this pro part of his career, and it's not likely that he's coming back. So maybe they know that some team has promised him something, or maybe it's just the back. Maybe they don't know that much, but it's just the back and forth with Theorough and his camp, his representation, and they don't have a good sense that that it's looking like he's not going to, land something that's preferable to then, motivate him to come back to school. They don't have those feels from that situation. They also said he is welcome back at Arkansas. We would take him back in a heartbeat. We've got room for him. So this is not like the Boogie Flan situation at all. Which, when you hear that last part, the conspiracy theorist in me goes, okay, could it be being downplayed to me just a little bit? Maybe they're not sure and they don't want to raise any indication that maybe there's more hope that'll come back, and then set expectations because they know, I cover the team and do these segments, whatever. And maybe there's a stronger notion that maybe it's more possible than they want to let on right now. I can't rule that out. I think that's less likely to be the case, but it could be the case. I don't go into any conversation with anybody with my eyes closed and, trying to understand that the information that, it's probably good. So far, what I've gotten from that staff is played out like they're telling me. So, that's what they think. That's the intel. Arkansas does not always good stuff. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. Go Hogs. Got these comments. I'm not good with them, folks. All right, so that's the intel on that part of it. I do, Theorough. What would that mean? I talked about this on Drive Time yesterday. If you got, and I put a percentage on Knox, I said 95 to 99% that he comes back. And I think I said 85 to 95% now that Thiero stays in, which, and that was before I had the conversation with one of Arkansas's assistant coaches, staff members. So now, I'm probably going to raise that percentage back up to 95% for Thiero that he stays in. So I'm in that 95 to 99% range that he probably stays in, but I'm leaving out a chance, right? I'm leaving out a better, even maybe better in that range than a Lloyd Christmas. You're saying there's a chance. And so, we're not ruling it out. To me, this boils down to is if we hear Thiero back to Arkansas, it means he just could not get a draft guarantee with the kind of guaranteed money spread out over a couple of years that makes him want to go that pro route now versus what he can make it a year at Arkansas and give himself a chance to do a little better next time. The difference between him and a guy like Boogie, when you're making those calculations, the longer you stay in college, the harder it is really to improve your draft stock. To me, Thiero would really have to improve the skill level, the shooting, those kind of things for part of baking in a decision to come back to be really improve your draft stock. You're going to have to really improve some of those soft skills, some of the nuance, having counters in your game other than A to B downhill bully ball driving. But you get him back, and I said this on Drive Time, and you get Carter Knox back, you're a top 5 rated team coming into the college basketball season. You're going to have projections as, one of the top 2 contenders to win the SEC, which are kind of going to be in that conversation, I think, if you don't get him back. But if you do, and you might even have some outliers out there, some folks that do college basketball projections that say, hey, Arkansas, they might be number 1 coming into the season. They might be the top contender to win a national title. Because look at your retention and your minutes. I mean, you'd be up there. You're already only second to Purdue if you get Carter Knox back, and your minutes retention, that would go way up. And now you might be number 1. I'd have to go and do the calculations. I didn't do that before I came on. I probably should have. and I didn't. We'll bring it up another time. I'll do those calculations maybe before the next time I come on. But to do Theorough, you're talking about your defense, your elite defense that finished 18th in Kim Palm last year. This guy is one of the most versatile defenders at the college level. It's what makes him attractive to NBA teams is that defensive versatility, the body, the strength, the athleticism. And he's been in, he's a grown man. He's been in college for a while. He did some really good things last year to kind of give himself a chance here to be drafted. So remember, I have a draft scout that told me, and we talked about this a couple episodes ago, that said, look, man, I'm not as high on Theorough as what you see in some of these mocks and maybe some other scouts are. This guy's a team scout for the NBA, one of the top organizations, honestly, arguably the best in a while. And he said, look, because of the lack of skill, I don't have Theorough projected as highly, and how I big board grade him, kind of 45-ish mid second round. It's kind of where he had both him and Knox, kind of the same ballpark. Saw the strengths of both of their games as bully ball play, Knox with better skill. He acknowledged that at this time. But all right, so Thiero, if you got him back, look out, man. I'm just telling you, look the hell out. Look the frick out. Get out of the way. Arkansas, I mean, outside of not addressing shooting, now you've got your frontline depth. You've got a starter back. Trevor Brazile now is, part of that. You figure all that out. It's retention too. A guy that understands Calipari and what he expects better than anybody. DJ Wagner being the second most, tenured player under Cal at that point, if it happens that way. Arkansas at that point, it's back to a 9 deep in its, preferred rotation. And then you've got better quality for emergencies and guys like Isaiah Seeley and Kareem Martell. Again, it doesn't look like he's coming back. The staff doesn't think he's coming back. But here's what's also interesting. I've been saying on several of these segments, one of the reasons they've pumped the brakes for a while is to see what's going to happen with Carter and let this process with the draft play out in terms of who are the players really available to come back. And part of that equation, I guess, technically is even a Duke Thiero, right? So it makes sense that they haven't been real active, because if you did get Thiero back, look, you said retention mattered more than anything. Even though Calipari and the roadshow thing we interviewed him the other day, and I asked him that specifically, he said no, and he tried to balance it with 4 high school, 4 retention, 2 out of the portal. But the truth was they started with retention. The big money went to retention. That mattered more than anything. They already had Acuff and Malik Thomas from back in November. They've had Acuff committed since July. He was the succession plan for Boogie. You're replacing one projected potential, likely all-league kind of a talent that could be your all-everything at the one with another one. It just, you'd already had a plan for that. You kind of had some stuff with Thiero. You were trying to keep him. You were looking at Keyshawn Hall and had a nice NIL deal set up for him. He didn't want to wait around, and he wanted a bigger role than Arkansas was willing to promise him. They had the money, and it was going to be a good role. It was just not quite where he Auburn was able to sell more in terms of what he would be there. So that's, and we've talked about all of that. And even Nate Ament, that 3-4, not the same as player as a Duke Thiero, but kind of that same positional situation on how you would work that. They had a lot of NIL money lying around for him. So there's money there for Thiero. Do you then interject maybe a little bit more to try to persuade him out? Again, I'm not saying they haven't done that. I don't know that. I didn't ask the staff member that part of it. I just know that they don't see him coming back. They just think it's highly unlikely. It almost sounded as if they've just accepted the fact that he's probably gone and staying gone or whatever. So we're almost 20 minutes in. Malik's going to have to take 10 threes a game. If he's taking 10 threes a game, it means one of two things. He's really, really freaking good, and you want that, or Arkansas's in trouble. It's one of the two. I think it's pretty cut and dry there. I don't think there's middle ground on 10 3 attempts a game on a true freshman. When it's I don't look at guys. There's just a few guys I look at and say, God, like a Cooper Flag, where I'm like, that dude, barring an injuries, it's almost can't miss on how good they're going to be. So very rarely would I say, yeah, that's probably. So I don't know yet with Malik. I need to see it translate. I need to see what that looks like. I suspect there'll be up and downs there. All right, so that's the intel. Nearly now over 20 minutes in on Adu Theorough. Don't count on it. The staff again is not for now, and then we see what plays out. There's still a week. Today's the 21st. The withdrawal deadline's the 28th. The team will be moving on to campus this week, and I've got a nugget about Malik Thomas and speaking of Leak and Darius Acuff that falls in line with getting to campus, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. But the next intel is something I've been saving for a few days. Again, I've been kind of piecemealing, parsing out. I did this intentionally. We just have to separate ourselves here as the ones that are really drilled into this Arkansas basketball recruiting, and and it is. And this is a player. We're going to talk about big men. We know we've said so many times Arkansas's big men, when you look at what they've done in these first couple of roster builds, has been out of the portal, really. I mean, you retained Trevor in Brazil back-to-back years. The rest of it has come through the portal. One of them that transferred, I guess, was retention because he transferred with Cal from Kentucky, Big Z, to in year one. But high school Arkansas has been a spool of riches when you look at the 1, the 2, and the 3. J.J. Andrews, the most recent proof of concept, a 6'6" wing at a Little Rock Christian Academy, who is a 5-star. I don't care what the services say, but you just got that commitment. And then we've gone through all those names again. Go back and check out the Sunday and Monday segments if you haven't already. I went through a litany of guards and wings mostly in terms of Arkansas prioritizing. But here's a big man in the 2026 class that's been on Arkansas, been more than just on the radar for a while. We've reported on all of it. And this is an interesting guy. 7'1" listed at. I've seen his weight anywhere listed between the high 270s to nearly 300 pounds. Soft hands. If I was doing a poor man same stage kind of comparison, I'd probably go Joel Embiid. So I don't want to scare anybody into saying, all right, dude, but settle down here. But class of 2026, Arkansas offered him back in July of last year. We had an exchange where he confirmed, the head coach, John Calipari, offered me a scholarship. Cal went out to see him at his school last year. It's one of the players that Cal checked in on. So Arkansas has been recruiting for a while. We've talked about him. We've tweeted about him. Probably talked about him on one of these podcasts. And here it's a little bit confusing with his name because on his Twitter account, and where I've seen it referenced in several places, it's Diane Arafan, Diane, spelled like Diane, but Diane Arafan, Arafan. But if you look at all the recruiting sites, like you're trying to look up his recruiting rankings, like 247, Rivals, ESPN, he's listed as Arafan Diane. They've got it reversed. They got the names reversed in all three. So, but I go with what the kid has on his Twitter page. He knows better than anybody else how he wants his name out there. So Diane, then Arafan. He plays at Iowa United Prep. So that's in Iowa. His spring and summer grassroots team, 17U, Iowa United. So it's effectively the same name. Just one's a prep school, the other one's the spring and summer. And that happens sometimes, with some of these setups. But his spring and summer, he's on the Adidas circuit. He's one of the names I've been holding on to. Arkansas, when Chuck Martin went out to Adidas over the weekend, I was at Nike EYBL. I was at Adidas 2 weeks prior to that in Texas. And that was not a live eval session. But some of these things I've been kind of sitting on. I've referenced on some of this. I'm sitting on some stuff, been talking about it for a while. Part of that was because I want to make sure we talk about it and not others who pretend to cover this stuff. I want you to get the real insight on what's going on here. It's not about ego. It's about getting the information correct and making sure that you're not getting sloppy thirds. You're getting it direct from what's going on. But Arafan, this is probably a guy that Arkansas is going to prioritize as much as anybody in the 2026 class. Now, teams like, I've seen multiple high majors involved with him, but some of the ones that I've kind of noticed lately, like Indiana's jumping in there. Well, you got to think some of the Big Ten schools he's playing up there at Iowa United. So you got to figure Big Ten, but there are teams in, the Big 12. Arizona State's one of those. When I look at the SEC, there'll be other programs in the league like Florida. I know Florida's been involved. So there's that. So this is a guy that's just like but 22nd ranked, according to 247 Sports. And so when I hear attributes of a big man that caught someone's eye, and then I go and I realize this is who it is, that's who it is. It's this guy. And I went and watched some of his highlights. He put up several double-doubles in the Adidas 3SSB circuit over the weekend. 20-point, 10-rebound kind of games. But I mentioned the Joel Embiid. It is a very kind of a stretch to go there in terms of, he's not that kind of player that Embiid is now. Probably not as highly thought of at the same stage, maybe. And certainly bigger at the same stage. Joel, got bigger over time. But size-wise, it's similar. But what I like is the low post work, some of that Embiid shows. He's got some of that game, low block, pivot baseline, turn over the shoulder and shot. He'll take a few threes. You saw a highlight where he knocked down a three. Will pass. But he's got a variety of skills. And to hear attributes of, soft hands, high motor, runs the floor, engaged, those kind of things. It's impressive. And then you watch the footage on the guy and you see the highlights and it sells that. When I was at Adidas a couple of weeks ago, because of the schedule and some of the stuff I was doing out there, I didn't get to see as much of him as I wanted to. Just, like 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, not enough to really put together a full, report scout on him, other than, trying to go off footage and highlights and things like that, which I don't always like to base my opinion solely on that kind of stuff. But he's a guy that when you looked at Arkansas going after Muhammad Silla in the 25 class, and, that became an NIL thing, and Arkansas passed at the end. They basically had a silent commitment based on what Arkansas had for him NIL-wise, and Georgia Tech had that money and made that happen. And Arkansas could have countered and didn't. So this is a situation with NIL. Let's see where it goes. Let's see how other teams prioritize him. I think Arkansas is going to make him one of the top priorities. They are. And then we'll see where it goes from there. We'll see what happens. There's plenty of time on some of this stuff. And then some of these guys will be making decisions sooner rather than later. I'm not saying like a JJ Andrews who got his done before spring and summer, but visits, we'll see when they work, when visits are worked in. A lot of it will be after the summer, but a lot of players may want to make decisions this time around before their senior season, or at least by the early period, because of how important the portal is and how college programs, especially high majors, prioritize that now. And so a guy like this could get it done. We'll see. So again, the name Diane, last name Arafan, and you'll see that reversed if you look it up. If you go to Rivals or 247 and even ESPN, I think those recruiting pages for him, when you go look that up, they've got it in reverse on the name. But if you go to his Twitter account, that's how he has it. Diane, first name, last name Arafan, a 7'1" guy. And again, he's a put together dude, man. But Caliparian's been on his high school campus. Martin was at Adidas 3SSB, so that's who saw him. And again, You talk about the hands. You talk about the some of the skill stuff, the motor. When you talk about a guy that big, to have that kind of energy or that determination to stay engaged in plays, that's a big deal. That's something that's coveted when you're looking at the next level, and maybe someone you could develop for the next level. And Calipari, Kenny Payne, we know what the track record is there over time and over the years with the big men they've helped. But we haven't seen it at Arkansas yet from the high school ranks. It's been strictly really ones, twos, and threes. So maybe this is someone that goes into it. All right, we spent a lot of time on that. Real quickly, let's get into some of this other stuff. And I'm just going to jump into Thiero and Knox. I'm going to give percentages real quick, just for both of them. I'm kind of in that 95 to 99% range. Again, that Theorough stays in. And I'm going to ease up with some of the feedback on Knox and the idea that Norlander thinks some of that feedback was better than he thought, and the fact that scout told me he knows that teams are bringing him in. I'm probably going to stretch that out to an 85 to 95%. I'm in that much of a range now that he comes back still. So it's still very positive, but I've gone from 95 to 99% that he comes back for Knox to 85 to 95%. So that's where I'm at with that. We saw the list, 33 player list come out for Team USA camp tryouts, junior national for the FIBA U19. I think the FIBA World Cup. It's one of the FIBA things this summer, and so the tryouts at Team USA junior national camp are coming up, and they've got 33 players trying out. So I tweeted this list out yesterday, and I put, this is good news for Arkansas because you don't see Darius Acuff. Look, Acuff has been part of Team USA. He was the MVP of the U18 FIBA play. They won a gold last year. Scored a lot, assisted, rebound. I mean, he was the MVP. And they got that gold medal. I think they won unbeaten. But he could have easily been part of this. And so this is interesting because it's a lot of class of 2026 guys, a lot of five-star guys that Arkansas is recruiting. And they're on the list for this camp, but you also see some incoming freshmen, guys like Chris Sinek Jr. going to Houston, class of 2025, obviously. Koa Pete off to Arizona, class of 2025. These are guys that have been involved with Team USA. There's just a couple of names at least. There's more, but those are just two I picked out of guys that are incoming freshmen that'll be doing this. We know Anthony Black, and he was one that was a late arriver at Arkansas because he did the FIBA Team USA Junior National thing in the around this time and through the summer and leading into his freshman year, where the team's already moved on to campus, started summer session, summer school, and they're already going through the limited practice stuff. So you had to wait a little bit on him, and so that was that year. Now there was a little bit different for him because Arkansas got extended practices later in the summer. If you remember, that was the foreign trip. All those exhibition games, the 4 exhibition games they had over in Europe. And so that team got extra practices and got to actually play against real competition other than them, not college teams, but you remember that. So it was a little different for AB. He did get more practice time just because of how that played out. Did the Team USA junior national stuff first and then joined the team later, the Razorbacks, for that tour over in Europe. But to see that Acuff and Malik Thomas are not on that list, not taking part in that, I think is a positive. And I can tell you that the thought is that this was an intentional move on Acuff so that he can get to Arkansas. Same with Malik Thomas, so they can be part of what Arkansas is building and not delay that. So that's good. That's a good thing. It's what I put in the tweet yesterday. I said, this is good. This is what it means. But we just talk about it here real quick. All right, the last order of business, bracketology, Joe Lunardi. The last time he did an update for his ESPN, I guess you can call it way too early. We know all this stuff changes. It's just based on what rosters look like as now. But he's got Arkansas as a 4 seed. The last time he did one of these was a 5 seed. So they've moved up a seed line in his projections. If you wanted to compare that to a top 25 kind of a ranking, that'd be somewhere. Because we know bracketology and seeding and all that doesn't necessarily equal what a poll ranking is, but it's in line with somewhere being ranked between 13th and 16th. John Rothstein updated his rankings, I think it was day before yesterday, maybe yesterday, and he had Arkansas at 10th. Again, all this is based on a Carter Knox return at minimum. If you get Theorough back, like I said, I think you jump in all of these things. Could you go as far from a 4 seed in bracketology to a 1? But I think at least a 2, maybe a 1, because I think Arkansas would be a top 5 ranked team by most prognosticators if you get Knox and Thiero back. Again, the Theorough thing doesn't seem real likely, but we bring it up because who knows? Who the hell knows for sure until we know? So that's that on the bracketology part. I just thought it was interesting, because the last projection he did as a 5 seed, that was with the thought that Arkansas, that Knox was coming back, and Arkansas hasn't had any moves in a while, right? They got 2 big men out of the portal back in April, so nothing new but it may be just the whole landscape of things and comparing Arkansas to what's happened with maybe some other teams since then. And so it went up, better than going down, right? Thought it was worth mentioning. All right, we're going to sign off. 36 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. If something breaks like Carter Knox or do Thiero news later today, we're going to get right back on here, or anything else that matters. But if not, it probably something tomorrow. I've got more recruiting stuff that we haven't talked about yet that's very interesting that you'd like to know about some of the top players in the country. And this is another one that we've got more to talk about that I've been saving and holding on to. We're just going to kind of, like I said, piecemeal some of this in so that we can fully own it. But until next time, thank you for being here. Please hit subscribe, like, and share, and we'll see you soon.